For centuries, the Vatican has stood as a symbol of divine authority, but behind its marble halls lies a financial architecture far more complex than most imagine. Hidden beneath layers of tradition, ritual, and secrecy, the Church quietly built one of the most enigmatic economic systems in history. The average visitor sees only art, faith, and grandeur. Yet beneath the polished floors are archives that stretch for miles, holding documents that few living souls have ever touched. Within these silent chambers lie records of ancient agreements, forgotten treaties, and financial transactions that help shape entire empires. Every pope, every council, and every decree contributed to a hidden network of influence sustained by wealth that flows like an unseen river. This story is not about corruption or conspiracy alone. It is about how a spiritual institution mastered the art of accumulating power without appearing to seek it. As we begin this journey, you will discover how mystery, money, and faith intertwined to form an economic engine that quietly influenced the world while remaining shrouded in divine silence. Welcome to the side of the Vatican the world was never meant to witness. Long before modern banking existed, the Vatican discovered the timeless principle that influence and resources travel hand in hand. In its early centuries, the Church received vast land donations, tithes, and precious gifts from kings, nobles, and devout followers. While outwardly these offerings were framed as acts of piety, they were carefully recorded and strategically managed, transforming faith into financial leverage. Monasteries became not only centers of spiritual life, but also hubs of economic activity, producing goods, lending resources, and controlling trade routes. Every altar, cathedral, and sacred treasury carried with it the seeds of a growing empire. The papacy, aware of the delicate balance between devotion and control, cultivated relationships with rulers who relied on spiritual approval for legitimacy, thereby extending influence over taxation, commerce, and diplomacy. Through these networks, the Vatican gradually turned faith into a complex system of financial power, quietly influencing kingdoms while maintaining the appearance of divine neutrality. The genius of this strategy lay not in brute force, but in subtlety. Wealth accumulated in shadows, decisions shaped by unseen hands, and power wielded with discretion. As we trace these foundations, it becomes evident that the Vatican's economic story is not just about money. It is about centuries of strategic foresight and careful orchestration that few outside its walls have ever comprehended. As centuries passed, the Vatican's wealth grew not merely through donations, but through strategic alliances, calculated investments, and shrewd management of assets. During the Renaissance, the Church became a pivotal player in European politics and finance, wielding influence that extended far beyond spiritual matters. Popes engaged in land acquisitions, controlled banks, and orchestrated complex financial networks that intertwined with the fortunes of kings and merchants alike. Artistic commissions, often seen as cultural patronage, doubled as investments. Valuable works of art, gold-plated relics, and tapestries secured long-term wealth and prestige. The Vatican carefully managed its estates, monasteries, and trade relationships, often outpacing secular rulers in financial foresight. Behind closed doors, ledgers recorded loans, interest, and property transactions with meticulous precision, creating an intricate web of economic power hidden beneath the guise of piety. Even during wars and political upheavals, the Church maintained its financial influence, quietly guiding markets, funding diplomacy, and sometimes acting as the ultimate lender to monarchs. This centuries-long expansion illustrates how the Vatican's wealth was not accidental, but a deliberate accumulation of power, patience, and foresight. The pattern is clear. The more subtle the control, the greater the lasting impact. A secret empire growing in plain sight, yet unseen by most of the world. By the late Middle Ages, the Vatican had begun to function as more than a spiritual authority. It had become a discrete financial powerhouse. Monastic institutions and papal treasuries evolved into proto-banking networks, facilitating loans, managing deposits, and overseeing the transfer of funds across Europe. Nobles and monarchs in need of capital for wars, infrastructure, or personal indulgence often turned to the Church for discreet financial support. While outwardly these transactions appeared charitable or religious, they frequently carried implicit obligations, tying kingdoms and influential families to the Vatican's economic agenda. Interest, fees, and bonds were carefully documented, creating a layered system of accountability invisible to the public eye. The Church also leveraged its moral authority, influencing credit decisions and ensuring repayment through both persuasion and subtle political pressure. These hidden financial operations were meticulously recorded in ledgers, some of which remain locked away in archives to this day. By controlling the flow of capital, the Vatican could shape markets, stabilize economies, and quietly dictate terms to rulers, all while preserving its sacred image. The genius of this approach lay in its duality. The Church maintained its spiritual legitimacy, yet operated as a shadow bank that few dared to question. Understanding this chapter of hidden finance is key to grasping how centuries of wealth were not merely inherited, but strategically grown and preserved under the veneer of faith. Beyond the gilded halls and grand chapels of the Vatican lies a realm few outsiders have ever glimpsed: the secret archives. Often shrouded in legend, these archives contain a labyrinth of documents, financial records, treaties, and correspondence spanning over a millennium. Within these walls, ledgers detail donations, property transactions, loans, and investments, each entry a fragment of the Vatican's quietly amassed fortune. The secrecy surrounding these archives is deliberate. They are not merely historical records, but instruments of influence, documenting relationships with monarchs, merchants, and financiers across Europe and beyond. Scholars, clerics, and occasionally historians have been granted limited access, yet most of the knowledge remains tightly guarded, its contents influencing political and economic decisions in ways the public could never discern. The archives reveal a pattern. The Vatican's wealth was meticulously catalogued, diversified, and managed, creating a financial network that transcended generations. Here lies the proof of a centuries-long strategy, blending piety with prudence, faith with finance, and secrecy with strategy. Every scroll and book tells a story not only of spiritual devotion, but of calculated economic mastery, demonstrating that the Vatican's hidden wealth was never accidental. It was the product of careful observation, meticulous planning, and a deep understanding of both human ambition and institutional power. This chapter of secrecy underscores the duality that has defined the Vatican for centuries. The Vatican's wealth is not confined to ledgers and land. It is physically embodied in gold, precious artifacts, and sacred relics. Over centuries, countless donations of gold, silver, and jewels poured into the Church from rulers, nobles, and devotees seeking spiritual favor or protection. These treasures were carefully stored in vaults and hidden chambers, often under layers of security designed to withstand theft, war, or political upheaval. Beyond material wealth, the Vatican acquired priceless art, manuscripts, and sacred objects, items whose cultural, historical, and financial value has only grown over time. Each piece was catalogued meticulously, creating a tangible network of assets that could be leveraged if needed, either as collateral for loans or as symbols of influence. The Church's understanding of value was both spiritual and practical. While sacred, these assets were also instruments of power, silently reinforcing its position in European politics and finance. Even in times of conflict, the Vatican safeguarded these treasures, moving them discreetly when necessary, ensuring the continuity of wealth through generations. Gold and relics were more than symbols. They were silent allies in an economic strategy designed to preserve authority, ensure longevity, and maintain an invisible empire. The careful preservation and strategic use of these sacred assets reveal a sophisticated understanding of both material and symbolic capital that few institutions in history have matched. One of the Vatican's most enduring sources of wealth lies not in coins or treasures, but in land. From sprawling estates across Italy to smaller holdings throughout Europe, the Church meticulously acquired, maintained, and managed real estate over centuries. Every donation of property, whether a villa, farm, or urban plot, was catalogued and strategically integrated into a broader financial network. Monasteries, convents, and churches served dual purposes: centers of faith and hubs of economic activity, producing goods, generating income, and controlling local trade. Urban properties were often rented or leased to merchants and nobility, providing steady cash flow, while rural estates produced agricultural wealth that sustained communities and enriched the Church. The Vatican's real estate strategy was sophisticated: diversification of locations, careful assessment of productivity, and foresight to retain assets even during political upheaval or economic downturns. Over time, these holdings evolved into a vast, interconnected property empire, a tangible reflection of centuries of careful planning and strategic foresight. Through real estate alone, the Vatican secured financial independence, influence over local economies, and the ability to extend its reach across nations. By transforming land into both spiritual and economic assets, the Church created a foundation of enduring power that has quietly persisted, underpinning its global authority while remaining largely invisible to the public eye. Central to the Vatican's enduring wealth is the intricate network of donations that has flowed into its coffers for centuries. These contributions, ranging from small personal gifts to vast estates, were never random acts of generosity. They were part of a carefully nurtured system that connected the faithful, the elite, and powerful rulers directly to the Church. The Vatican's clerical hierarchy ensured that donations were strategically managed, recorded, and, when necessary, invested for maximum impact. Patrons often sought spiritual favor, indulgences, or social prestige, yet each offering subtly reinforced the Church's financial power. The flow of donations was not merely local. It spanned continents, connecting Europe to distant colonies and trade hubs, providing liquidity that underpinned banking, lending, and investments. Monasteries, cathedrals, and religious institutions acted as nodes in this global network, functioning as collection points, financial managers, and record keepers. Over time, this network created a cycle in which faith and finance became inseparable, allowing the Vatican to shape both spiritual and economic realities simultaneously. Each gift, small or large, contributed to a hidden empire that operated quietly, efficiently, and with foresight, demonstrating that the Church's wealth was a product of centuries of disciplined accumulation, meticulous record-keeping, and strategic. Despite its careful management, the Vatican's financial empire was not immune to scandal. Throughout history, whispers of mismanaged funds, secret loans, and covert investments surfaced, highlighting the tension between spiritual authority and economic power. Some popes were accused of lavish spending, questionable banking dealings, or using church wealth to influence political outcomes. These incidents, however, were often contained within the inner sanctum, carefully documented in archives yet shielded from public scrutiny. While outsiders may have perceived missteps, the Vatican's overall financial strategy remained resilient, adapting to crises while maintaining secrecy. These episodes illustrate the duality of the institution. publicly devoted to faith, yet privately engaged in sophisticated financial maneuvers. Even in moments of scandal, the Church leveraged its influence to stabilize assets, protect investments, and continue its long-term accumulation of wealth. The pattern of concealment, meticulous record-keeping, and strategic discretion ensured that temporary setbacks rarely disrupted the overarching empire. By examining these shadows, one can see how the Vatican balanced public perception with private economic mastery, demonstrating a level of financial cunning rarely seen in institutions claiming purely spiritual authority. Scandals were not failures, they were tests, refining an intricate system of hidden power. As the world transitioned into the modern era, the Vatican adapted its financial strategies to maintain relevance and expand influence. Beyond land and treasures, the Church diversified into stocks, bonds, international real estate, and even emerging markets, quietly participating in global finance while retaining its sacred image. Investment decisions were often guided by a combination of historical precedent, strategic foresight, and access to confidential intelligence through diplomatic channels. By aligning with influential banks, multinational corporations, and philanthropic institutions, the Vatican ensured that its wealth not only persisted, but also grew in ways largely invisible to the public. Modern financial instruments were carefully selected to complement traditional assets, creating a hybrid portfolio, blending centuries-old holdings with contemporary investments. The Church's presence in global markets allowed it to influence policy indirectly, foster alliances, and secure resources in times of economic uncertainty. All of this was conducted under the mantle of spirituality and moral authority, masking financial operations that rivaled major secular institutions. The Vatican's modern financial acumen reflects a rare ability to merge faith, diplomacy, and economic insight, sustaining a global empire that thrives quietly behind the scenes, shaping economies and preserving power across centuries. In the 21st century, the Vatican has extended its influence into the digital and globalized economy, embracing new financial technologies while preserving its traditional wealth. Though much of its power remains behind the scenes, the Church now engages in investments that span online markets, international banking networks, and strategic partnerships with emerging economies. Cryptocurrencies, digital assets, and tech ventures are cautiously explored, often through intermediaries, ensuring that innovation complements centuries-old financial foundations without compromising secrecy. Digital diplomacy allows the Vatican to maintain connections with global leaders, investors, and philanthropic organizations, creating networks that simultaneously advance spiritual objectives and financial stability. Online presence, modern communication strategies, and international collaborations further amplify influence, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of the modern economy. While the Church continues to safeguard gold, property, and priceless art, it increasingly recognizes that digital assets and global networks are vital to sustaining its hidden empire. By blending ancient strategies with contemporary financial tools, the Vatican secures not only wealth, but also the capacity to shape global economic currents quietly, preserving its centuries-long legacy of power in a world moving at unprecedented speed. For centuries, the Church has built and protected its wealth through careful planning, strategic alliances, and strict secrecy. Its influence reaches far beyond gold, land, or art, shaping politics, global finance, and cultural identity. What truly distinguishes this empire is not just its size, but its ability to stay largely unseen, guiding events quietly from behind marble halls and sealed archives. The Vatican's financial story is tightly connected to its spiritual mission, blending authority with strategy and patience. Understanding this legacy reveals how faith, secrecy, and wealth combine to create long-lasting influence. Today, the Vatican remains more than a religious center. It is a discrete economic force whose accumulated knowledge and resources continue to shape the modern world.